Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sabrina. I'm the co-founder of Calm Collective Asia. We're a mission-driven organization that is normalizing mental health in Asia. And today I'm joined by two friends, Jennifer and Wayne. Jennifer in Singapore, Wayne in, where are you, Wayne?
I'm in Palo Alto, California.
Yes, exactly. So, and here we are talking about drinking, stress, and the Asian hustle. I think all of us have hustled hard as Asians. And also, if you're not Asian, you've probably hustled, and that's why you're here. And um, before we begin, and before I hand it off to Jennifer to host the session today, share with us where you're tuning in from, and if you would like to share, what's your intention for joining us today? So feel free to share in chat. You might have noticed that, um, yeah, we're gonna be helming the session today between the three of us, and as you do that, I shall spotlight Jen, Wayne, and myself. And Jen, over to you. Feel free to share about yourself and the session.
All right. Well, thank you, Sabrina, for having me today. I'm really excited to see everyone joining from, wow, all over the world. So I'm looking forward to having a very interesting conversation about drinking culture in the workplace, socially in Asia. My name is Jennifer Poe. I have, I guess I've practiced for 15 years now as a corporate lawyer. And in very stressful environments, I was a capital markets lawyer doing, IPOs in New York, Hong Kong, London, kind of moved around the world, and most recently in California as well, and now based in Singapore. So definitely have seen, my share of drinking in the investment banking, kind of finance, legal industry. And very passionate as well about the topic of mental health, especially in the legal profession. But today I'm joining in my own personal capacity as a yoga instructor, and also as someone who's really passionate about mental health. And um, let me just I guess hand it over to Wayne to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wayne Kepner. I'm a addiction scientist at Stanford Medicine. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So the city I live in is Palo Alto, which is Stanford, but basically you can think of me living in San Francisco. It's like 30 minutes outside of San Francisco. It's very interesting. When I joined this webinar, I had a perspective of what I was going to share. And now that Jennifer shared her story, like it's kind of awakening kind of more authentic side of me that I had kind of forgotten, which was like I was just kind of a classic Asian, high pressure academic kid. And like I had kind of forgotten about that, right? And you're talking about, oh, I did these high stakes, I was in London, da, da, da. I'm like, oh wow, like yeah, I went to UCLA for undergrad and I did my master's and PhD at UC San Diego, and now I'm at Stanford. And I kind of forget that that is my trajectory. I've had such ups and downs in my life that I forget that in the first part of my life, I was very traditionally like an Asian academic. And I had kind of forgotten that. So thank you for bringing that back up. And yeah, like Asian hustle was who I was. And I kind of lost that, but to your point, like it's always there. So thank you for bringing that back up.
Thanks, Wayne. Sabrina, do you want to say a bit about your
Oh,
background and what's your kind of interaction with, drinking culture, Asian hustle?
yeah. I mean, so Jennifer and I, we both we went to the same schools, some of them, right? And so in those school cultures where everyone's very academically inclined, very competitive, the Asian hustle was real. And even when we went overseas, so Jennifer and I met in Madrid, right, where it's like party central. We brought our Asian hustle with us because it was so ingrained in us as children, as teenagers from school or from our families. So from a schooling perspective as well, similar to Wayne and Jennifer, I definitely got very exposed to that. I also embodied that for a while. And following that, with the whole drinking culture that came in when I started partying, during university, I did business school. So all my finance friends and marketing friends would be like, let's go to the club, let's go to the bar after school. And I was complicit in all of that because I was DJing and I would be the one bringing all my friends to the party. So, um, and through that DJing stint, I did see a lot of stressful friends and people that I did not know turn up in the nightclubs and the events I would DJ at. And a lot of them oftentimes came in after work. They may be lawyers, bankers, people doing all sorts of other jobs as well across the board, blue collar work, white collar work. And everyone's just, common, like there's some common humanity there. Everyone's kind of stressed, everyone's hustling in their own way, whether it's from their high pressure, I mean, whatever high pressure job that was, right? Whether you're driving a truck or whether you're um, cleaning the floor or you're um, doing a very high stakes IPO deal. Everyone was stressed and everyone was drinking together. So that's my relationship with it. And also from a mental health perspective, I deal with bipolar disorder and manage it on a daily basis, really. And a big turning point for me was in 2016 when I had realized that drinking or alcohol was actually not helpful for my mental health. So that's something that we can also unpack a bit more later.
All right. Well, thank you. I think it's really interesting. We spoke about this a bit, Wayne, earlier about how, I think the cultures are really different growing up in Asia versus, growing up in the US. And I think Sabrina and I met, both, part of I was doing business school. I think she was doing an exchange, in university. And I think growing up in Asia is kind of like, drinking is one of those like forbidden fruit, like, kind of things where like when you're overseas, then it just gets, like let's bring the party on. So there was definitely an aspect of that. And but to move on to talk also about, my I guess my experience with, the legal profession and in particular these really high pressure kind of corporate environments, it might be useful, for me to just, I guess, set the stage a bit by, quoting just some statistics that I found when I was researching, this topic. I couldn't find any kind of equivalent studies of the scale. In Asia, but I found one done by the American Bar Association that interviewed, 13,000 lawyers. And the studies found that, around like 30% of those attorneys surveyed had actually reported problematic drinking habits. And this is compared to a national average for the general population of 10%. So it's quite, significantly higher. 46% reported, having experienced depression at some point in their career, and 61% reported concerns with anxiety at some point of, their career. And they also found a strong correlation between anxiety and depression with, the problematic drinking. So, there's definitely something to unpack there in terms of how people use, I guess, drinking as a coping mechanism when they're in these high pressured work environments. So let's dive into that a bit more, I guess. Do either of you, Sabrina or Wayne, have any thoughts about, why, I guess, why people turn to drinking? Yeah, what is the, I guess the emotional need or, the pressures that sit behind our drinking habits?
Sabrina, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first? I mean, in terms of like why people drink, people drink because it's fun, right? Let's be honest here. I think sometimes we fall into this trap of like black or white, right? Either drinking is bad, like demonize it, or drinking is glorified, like it's a spiritual experience. And like the reality is it's not good. Drink alcohol is not good or bad, it's just powerful. And I think that's the framing we need to tell our kids too. Like I don't know about you all, but I never got the alcohol talk. Did you? Like I don't know if my mom ever drank. I never saw her drink in her life. My grandparents, both from North Korea, like they never drank, right? So it's not like they sat me down and were like, Wayne, let me show you any kind of rituals. I just, I got no talking at all. So I learned from my friends, and now I have a lot of experience and a lot of education in alcohol. And I think about like if I have kids, like how would I talk about it? Um, and I would say, yeah, it's really powerful. It's not good, it's not bad. And to your answer your question, like why did I use it? I was using it because it was doing something for me in my life. I had so much stress, and when you're a teenager, there's so much going on. Your life is changing. I'm like an Asian kid in Los Angeles growing up in Koreatown. I'm trying to get into college, and like things, I'm trying to get a girlfriend for the first time in my life, and things are hard, right? And then you try a drink, and it's like, oh my God, like this helps me, you know? And I think we have to be really honest for probably most people, alcohol is a net positive in their life. For most people are not alcoholics, they're not, gutter drunks, they're not homeless. Like the majority of people enjoy alcohol, and it does something good for them, and that's great. And there's another class of people that maybe it's a net harm. Maybe it's a net little bit harm, right? And they could go on with their life and that's fine. And for some people, it's a disaster, right? So like kind of breaking it up into like, it's not good, it's not bad, it's not black, it's not white. It's more of this nuance, right? So to circle back to your question, like why was I drinking? Because I was under a lot of stress and it helped. At least in the beginning, it was we have a saying, it's first it was fun, then it was fun with problems, and then it was just problems, right? So yeah, I'll stop there. And Sabrina, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, no, it's the same. I was like, oh no, that resonates. So I remember so I didn't have the alcohol talk. Neither did I get any other talk about anything else. But um when it came to alcohol, my mom was actually the one who said, "Hey, you're 14 now. Let's try alcohol." And I was like, okay. So my mom actually introduced it to me and she was like, try it out. And she picked like a really yucky drink. And she was like, here it is. And I was like, bah, yeah. So she's like, yeah, it's not nice, no? So there's no hype over this. So now you've tried it, move on. And I was like, okay. So I never thought about it for the next few years until my friends started partying after the A levels. We were like, yeah, let's go to Zouk, ladies' night in Singapore every Wednesday. And so it became cool. It became a social lubricant, right? Because it did something for me. It helped me get along with my friends. It helped me feel included. And I had a few friends who were like, I got a whole bunch of shots and you have to have one. Jaeger bombs, shots, right? And I was like, okay, I'm so cool. Let me drink all of it. So, and then a few hours later, I'd be like puking my face off and losing my phone and whatnot. So it was fun. It was fun until I became a problem. Um, and it became a problem eventually when yeah, I realized I was, very connected with my mental health. But I would say for me, it was really peer pressure and social. Like I just wanted to be included. I had friends who were opening bottles and I was like, wow, so cool. Oh my gosh, so expensive. Let me not waste the money as well. So that's the other part of it where it's like, oh no, that we already bought it. We cannot waste the money. Let's not pour it on the floor because that's what you do when you have too much. Or yeah, and I think the other thing is also at work. It was also very normal to go with your colleagues and have a drink, right? So it was just a social ritual. And even at weddings as well, right? Oh, let's do the toast in Singapore. It's yam sing for those of you who know it. So it just became a ritual that I discovered was very part and parcel of life once I hit 18, right? If I'm not drinking, I felt that I wasn't included. So it took me a long time before I could feel comfortable enough to um, say no to alcohol and set my own limits.
Right, thanks for sharing. I mean, what about, so, you've both spoken about, your childhood experiences and your first introduction to alcohol. Um, what about now, I guess, I guess both of you don't drink. So how is it like as an adult in the social setting, or even, in workplaces, I guess, so both social and work, like what are you observing there? Is there the same, kind of social pressures to drink? How difficult is it, or how easy is it for you to say no?
I can just chime in. It took me a long time before I learned to say no. So in 2016, I realized, so that was when I had a pretty bad mental health, I guess depression, right? And that was when I did the research and I tried to figure out, well, why do I feel so bad? And I felt worse every time I drank, I was like, yeah, red wine helped me, with my life. The answer is here. But every time I drank, I would just feel worse. And I then Googled it and I was like, oh, it's a depressant. No doctor ever told me that. They always said, you have one or two drinks, it's fine. So I thought it was fine. But then it got to a point where it kept sending me down again and again. And that was when I realized I had to stop, at least socially drinking. But I didn't set my limits very clearly. It was only, I think, in 2017 or 18 when I actually met a manager who said that. So we had after work drinks. All of them were very heavy drinkers and they could consume a lot of beers and alcohol in general. And my boss actually said that, hey, Sabrina, it seems like you're hesitating. I was hesitating. I was like, do I order one? Because if I don't, then I don't feel included because it was a new job and everyone was drinking, right? So under so much pressure, and this was in Paris, everyone was drinking after work. And so my boss said, you don't have to drink if you don't feel like one. And I was like, if I don't feel like one, that's acceptable. So that was the first time I actually got permission not to order a drink because in the past it was always like, oh, Sabrina, you're so boring. You're not gonna have a drink, not another one, not another one. You're gonna leave early. You're such a party pooper. So I had friends who came to me and said, what happened to you? You used to be the life of the party. You would be the one opening bottles and you had free drinks because you DJ. Why are you ordering water? So I had a lot of, I guess, shit from my friends. I got so much shit that I felt so bad saying no for a long time until that manager said it's okay not to have a drink. So that's me. And since then, I haven't had an alcoholic drink. Wayne, I want to hear from you.
Thank you, Sabrina. I would like to stay on this topic a little bit. It is interesting. We talked about starting drinking alcohol because it felt good and it did something for us. And that's all about how alcohol affects the brain, right? So you take a drink, goes inside, feels good. But then when we're talking about stopping alcohol, we're not talking about it missing it feeling good. We're talking about the social pressure, right? So it's so interesting how, like, if I haven't had a drink in t over 10 years. If you took me to an island by myself, I would have no problems not drinking alcohol, right? Like, it's fine. But you put me in a room with other people drinking, now I want to drink. Right? What is that, right? So it's like you start alcohol because it's doing something for you in your life, or it was doing something for me in my life. Stress was going down, like I felt more confident, I was social lubricant. But stopping alcohol, there is that, chemical component, but it's actually more social, right? It's the people who at my work function being like, "Oh, do you want something to drink?" I'm like, "No, I don't." Like, "Oh, why? Are you driving?" I'm like, "No, I'm not driving." Well, why aren't you drinking? It's like, I really don't want to get into it. It's really none of your business, but it's over and over. And it's kind of ironic, like I'm literally an addiction researcher, and you would think that people in my field would be pretty like sensitive to this issue, and it's not, right? Oftentimes, it's the most wet environment are these addiction conferences. And it's like, it's so funny. Like you'll go up on stage and present about alcoholism, and then as soon as you get off stage, everyone's getting hammered at the bar, right? So it's this interesting. environment where like I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs and they're looking at me and they're like they know, right? Because they know. But it's been a struggle. Um, and that's part of the reason I'm here is to I don't know many Asian people who are in recovery, who are out about it, who talk about it. I think in the US where I'm from, there's a lot of white people and Hispanic and Black who are maybe out in the recovery. I may be the only one that I know of that's Asian who's like open about it, be like, yeah, I had a problem with alcohol and with drugs, and I don't anymore. And I want to talk about it. I want to bring it out of the closet, so to speak. But if I was gonna say it was easy, like, I'd be lying. It's been very difficult. Luckily now I mentor students who are in their like 20s and undergrads, and for some reason in the US drinking is not cool anymore. Like if you're drinking, you're like old now, right? So like all my mentees are like not drinking. They're not even doing caffeine. They're doing like low caffeine coffee. So they're all about their health and wellness. So I'm like, oh, I don't drink. And they're like, oh yeah, like you're cool like us now. And people who are my age who are drinking, they're like, yeah, like only old people drink. And I'm like, oh, I'm not old yet because I don't drink. I don't know if that's the same in Singapore, but at least in California, if you drink, you're old. And I'm like, thank God I'm not old. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I don't know about your experience, Sabrina. I feel like that's kind of it's yeah, it's what people joke about. It's only the old people who go to clubs these days. I've definitely seen it in Singapore, as well. So there's definitely an age kind of divide there. But I'm also interested in hearing about, I guess, from both of you in two different parts of the world. Like, do you think there is a difference in how I guess there's a difference in culture in the workplace or socially kind of manifests itself, because I mean certainly for me when I was living and working in these different parts of the world, I can definitely share that I feel like when I was working as a corporate lawyer in Asia, there was a lot more of a pressure to drink. Like it's kind of part and parcel of the entertaining the bankers, or building that relationships, like when I did business trips to China, I mean it's infamous, right, for the baijiu, and like building on the the guanxi or things like that, right? So and obviously in the US is a very different scene there. So I guess, do you guys have any observations on yeah, cultural differences in drinking?
Yeah, I love to hear from Wayne, but I want to hear from the researcher and scientist. But I mean, my initial 2 cents would be um, it's definitely a lot more prevalent in Asia from what I've seen. I spent a lot of time in Europe as well as the US. I do see that in the US and Europe, from at least my experience, it's been a lot more of a social thing. So I don't see as much binge drinking. And I've actually seen amongst my friends, amongst my circles, a lot more um, drinking taking place in Singapore's culture. And even in Asia, there's so many different subcultures as well, right? Because so if you, yeah, I grew up Muslim. So if you look at the Malay Muslim culture versus, say, the Chinese culture, of which I'm also part of, the relationship with alcohol is completely different as well, right? I would say that the prevalence of drug usage amongst Malays is higher than Chinese, whereas I've seen that Chinese people are drinking a lot more than their Malay counterparts, despite being in Singapore, just because of the cultural nuances. Um, so I think what I've seen is that, at least I've also spent time in Korea. I know, Jen, you've been in Japan, and it's very common for folks to get pretty much hammered, right? Like drink your face off until it's all coming out. And as they say in Singapore, you merlion it out because you barf projectile. So it's pretty normal, at least growing up in my 20s, for people to just go get tons of drinks after work. I used to DJ on Wednesdays, and I would always wonder where everyone came from, and they would still make it to work the next day. So I would say it's definitely prevalent in Asia. I'm very familiar with that. But I would love to hear whether there are observations you've seen, both of you, right? In Western cultures, in Asian American culture versus like white people culture. I don't know. So, yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Sabrina. I think you hit it right on the head. There's a huge difference. First of all, we'll just talk about the US. Like when I was 25, I went to Seoul, Korea for a year and I taught SAT there and I was in the middle of Seoul and I was my first time actually spent my first birthday without my family in Korea. I was 25 years old and I was at work at like 8 p.m. They brought in a cake and they sang happy birthday to me and I was like, "Oh, this is the first time I've spent a birthday without at least one of my family, right? It didn't have to be my mom or my sister, but like some family member. I remember that being 25. And one thing that really struck me while I was there is alcohol is was very intimately involved with work, right? So we would work, a lot, 7 days a week. So it was okay to go out and have a drink for lunch, right? So the teachers, we had like 10 teachers and like 80 kids, and then for lunch the teachers would all go to lunch and we would get food and get hammered and then come back and teach like for the rest of the day. We'd come back all bright red and the kids would know we were drinking and that was like cool. It was like totally fine. But for me, coming from America, that was like a radically different way of life. In the US, like today, if you go, like if I go out to lunch with my fellows, and I come back and I'm hammered, like you probably would get fired or somebody would talk to you, right? It's very no go. So there's a huge difference there, just baseline of incorporating alcohol into work. In the Asian culture, it's much more like there's work and then alcohol is tied to work. In the American culture, it's very much separate. I think probably Jennifer, there's a lot of liability there, right? Like if you force your employees to drink and something bad happens, it's probably not going to be good for you. And I'm sure there's liability there. So that's probably part of it. In terms of Asian culture, there's also a huge variation in the United States. So, my lovely Korean people are the highest drinking in the US, and then there's Japanese under there, and then Chinese are under there. And then you have, some of the Viets and other people way at the bottom, and the Hawaiians are like way worse than everybody. And I, I think the culture of the homeland does bleed over into the US. Um, and then we're not even getting into the male female, right? Like that's a totally different topic. Um, but to sum up, it's very complicated and it really depends on where you're from, what industry you're in. So if you're in construction, there's definitely a bigger drinking culture. iBanking and law are famous for that. Um, and California is its own beast, right? We have like a health and wellness culture here versus if you're on in the South or in the Midwest, like more of like a agriculture farming town, it's going to be very different. So it's really hard to say one way or the other what's happening, but we do know drinking is there, but the way it looks is different depending on where you're from.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think it's, to me, alcohol is one of those things where it's so, because it's so, I don't know, woven into, in particular, I would say, the Asian kind of work and social culture, and it's so accepted, right, as a societal norm that it's not something that, even if you do have, a dependence on it, it's not something that you're actually, a lot of people are conscious about. And, I hear a lot, like in workplaces or just generally actually even in my social circles of like people almost kind of like wearing how much alcohol they can drink as a badge of honor. It's like, yeah, last night I went partying, I like drank how many bottles, and I only need 2 hours of sleep, and then this morning I'm just like caffeine up, and then I'm like beast mode, like here we go. And it's a common thing. So when when yeah, I mean it's when you're saying no, when you're starting to talk about this as a problem, I think a lot of people view that a lot as a weakness, or even not something that they want to open up about because of fear of judgment. So it's It's yeah, it's I feel like it's a lot more systemic than we think it is. And on that note, actually, let's move into talking about, how alcohol actually, impacts our well-being. Like what are, the other I guess, factors that are at play here. I think I started this conversation talking about, anxiety in the workplace, probably chronic stress, depression. So how do all these factors kind of interrelate with drinking?
So I can just share from my personal experience, right? I mean, I can see how we talk about how alcohol, um, is a social lubricant. It's like liquid courage as well. So it helps us. It can improve our lives to some extent, when it gives us the courage to join in social environments which we normally would not do. It helps us to engage with people that we may normally, yeah, we may not normally engage with. And I just want to honor that, right? Like, there's a reason why alcohol has been so present in our lives since, over many, like the hundreds and thousands of years. Like the early day humans were like, oh, alcohol, what a gift from God. So it has it does help us to some extent. And even at some point, there was a practice in at least in Asian culture or Chinese culture where if you give the baby a little bit of alcohol, it helps to calm it down. It will help to soothe it. So I think a lot of people have seen alcohol as a relaxant. But, after doing further research, when I was navigating my own mental health journey, I really did discover that alcohol is a depressant, and it really did worsen any low mood I was having, right? So if my mood was like already like, say this is like my normal mood, and I'm like, "Nyeh," here, like just beneath the baseline, alcohol would just send it way, way down. And given that I was managing depression or bipolar disorder at that point, my doctor had said, Sabrina, don't mix your alcohol with the medication you're taking because there may be more side effects and you may be more prone to suicidal ideation, right? And in fact, we have lost a couple of friends to suicide because of alcohol. Because, like, yeah, when they take alcohol along with their medication or even without medication, right? It can really send one spiraling, I would say, if you kind of tip over the edge of, I guess, too much alcohol for your own body. And so I don't know, I just really wonder, I want to honor what alcohol does for us. It does help us feel a bit better. It helps us to release that pressure, especially when we're stressed. It helps to relax us. But yeah, it's really, really a fine line between, when is it too much and when is it unhealthy. So on my end, like on my personal level, I've just decided that, all right, let's not even have this in my life, even though there is alcohol around in my room if my friends want it. But at least for me, it's something that I have chosen to draw a very hard boundary on. And personally, I've realized that my life is better without alcohol overall, even though it took a couple of years to be like, this is weird. I feel weird. It's very strange for me to like not have a drink when everyone else has one. So yeah, so that's my take. And probably more, but I'll pause here.
Wayne, any thoughts there?
Yeah. Thank you, Sabrina. I think we can you said a lot of good things there, especially about your mental health comorbidity or your struggles, and we can unpack that a little bit further. But just from a general perspective, I think Jennifer was talking about the badge of honor, right? And I know that feeling. I was young once too, and I was also a boy and tried to impress people, and like I could drink so much, and I remember that. And I think that type of thinking it's just old school. Like it's from a time where we didn't really understand the brain, not that well, right? We really thought alcohol was kind of like lifting a weight. You know, it's like, oh, if I could drink 10 shots, it's like lifting 100 pounds or 200 pounds, right? So we equated the mind, the brain with a muscle. And it's not like that's a weird way to think. There is some truth to it, right? But with modern medicine and modern neuroscience, we also know that drinking alcohol and taking drugs affects the part of your brain that allows you to do things. So it's not about a muscle that gets stronger or weaker, right? Like as you take the drug, it makes your ability to say no go down. And that's not something that my grandmother could have articulated to me, or even my mom, really. We didn't have fMRI. Like you go into a machine and they put a magnet on your head and duck, 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 and you get a picture of your head. And it's like, oh my God, Wayne, like your brain is a little bit thinner than it's supposed to be. Right. And that's not something my mom could have told me, right? That's not something my dad could have told me. But today we have this modern medicine, we have modern technology to say, look, the part of your brain that you're trying to use to stop drinking, it's not working properly. So it's not about being strong, it's not about being a man, it's about being a human with a brain that's not functioning the way it should be. And hopefully, like our generation, we can understand, our parents had their technology and their way of thinking, but we have this new data and we can tell our children it's not about being strong, it's just the way the brain works. Um, and hopefully we can take that into the future. Um, that's my goal at least.
Mm.
But Sabrina, we have like many more topics. If you have any specific things you want to bring up, I don't want to like gloss over the things that you said.
No, there's so much there. And I was like, I want to see what's going on with my brain. I want to do this. Sorry, I was like, "Tuk, tuk, tuk, tuk," exactly. I want to do that. Because I think what's, a lot of drinking is about how we feel. We want to feel good. We want to feel manly. We want to feel strong. We want to feel less stressed, right? But you can't, I think you only start to shift your relationship with alcohol once it starts visibly affecting the rest of your life, whether socially, whether mentally, or whether, visually you can see like, oh my gosh, my brain matter is gone. Um, so it's a really hard one, and it's really easy for us to just judge people by the amount of alcohol they're drinking or not drinking. And I just want to call that out, right? I think it's really hard when we're surrounded by folks who are pressuring us to drink, whether it's because of like cultural traditions or just lack of awareness, right? And that's exactly why we want to have this conversation. So, yeah.
And to your point about like, having family history of mental illness, having trauma, PTSD, anxiety, just stress in general. People are so individual. The brain is so complicated. And for me, I remember being a college student and watching my friends do exactly the same thing that I did. Everything like two like the ounce, right? Like 10 beers plus 1 ounce, 10 beers plus 1 ounce, right? Exactly the same. But for some reason, they could get up the next day and go to work, and I didn't, and it was so confusing as a young man, 19, 20 years old, like feeling like I was weak, right? Like, why couldn't I do this? And it was very confusing because, like, I had a lot of willpower and a lot of other things. I went to school, I did well in school, and then all of a sudden, like, I wasn't doing so well in school. And I didn't even want to do work hard anymore. And that was kind of my identity. I was somebody who worked hard, who got things done, and slowly that identity started to slip away. And it was very confusing for me. I didn't have the emotional intelligence. I didn't have the knowledge to understand what was happening. Slowly, my life slipping away. Um, and that was a struggle. And I think today we have a better grasp of what's going on to young people. And I think we have a responsibility to really spread the message about, you don't have to fall deep into a depression or deep into alcoholism to get help. We don't have to burn, we have to talk about hitting bottom, right? Like we don't have to hit bottom anymore. We don't have to crash a car. You don't have to have something really bad happen to you to start talking about, am I somebody who maybe alcohol and drugs is not right for? And that doesn't make me weak or not a man. It's just like me personally, right? If I have an allergy to olives, right? I don't eat olives, and people bring olives and they eat in their salad. Does that make me weak because I have an allergy to olives? Like, no, we don't think that way. But if like alcohol comes and like I'm the only guy who doesn't drink alcohol, it's like, ah, you're weak. And it's like, well, no, my body responds differently to alcohol than it does for you. There's a lot of foods that I respond differently to, right? So if you could start thinking in terms of that, I think it'd be really helpful. But I don't know if kids today feel that or not, and I really wish they did. But it's not clear to me that they do. I mean, we all know there is a huge youth mental health crisis. Video games, depression, loneliness, social media, vaping, like it's a real problem. Maybe not alcohol specifically, it is still there. Maybe it's cannabis, but just in general, the kids and their mental health, I think we can do better at. Um, yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's definitely true. And before we talk about, kind of what can we do about the situation? What are some coping mechanisms? I also want to make sure that we also spend some time talking about, we've spoken a lot about, alcohol and the social pressures around it. But I guess there's also another, issue of, people who are drinking on their own, right? I mean, your classic case of alcoholism there. And I know intimately, people who do that because, they're coping with a lot of stresses in their environments. And, I can definitely say that, in a legal environment, especially in early days, when I was a junior associate in a law firm, you're working round the clock, right? Like you don't get enough sleep. You're drinking like 10 cups of coffee a day, to kind of get through the day. Obviously when you're all wired up and you're trying to get that bit of sleep, alcohol helps, right? And so you kind of end up going on the cycle where it's just, caffeine, 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 alcohol, you're not working out, you're not really watching your diet, so there's also kind of that aspect going on. And, I believe it manifests itself in all sorts of, these types of high pressure, long hours, kind of work environments, not just the legal environment. So I guess in that sense, do you have any thoughts there? Do you have any kind of coping mechanisms there? I guess should organizations be talking about this, more, or how can organizations support?
Oh, wow, that's a great topic. I know this is Sabrina's wheelhouse, so I'm going to keep it short, but just in general, this is the classic. Okay, first let's start off with using workers, right? Like burning them out. Like if you're a corporation and you just want to maximize how much you get out of a worker, yeah, like work them to death for 10 years, they burn out, and then you just get another 24-year-old straight out of Ivy League, right? Like that probably works really well, and you just don't give a damn if they burn out at 35, right? Let's be honest there, that it may not be that they don't know, that they just don't care. So let's be honest there. It's most likely that they don't care. But let's say you work in a great corporation. The CEO is a good guy. They make money, but they're also responsible to their employees. Those companies exist for sure. And this CEO really sees his workers like working hard, struggling. They are drinking, but they're getting by. How do I increase their health? Well, you really have to balance the difference between, and this is pretty obvious, everyone knows, short-term benefits versus long-term benefits, right? Alcohol, we call it a dirty drug. Why is it a dirty drug? It's a dirty drug not because of the way you think, but on a molecular level, it's very, very, very small. Now, let me give you an example. Everyone has seen drugs on TV, right? You watch a TV show, it's a cop, they bust a guy, it's a young guy, they like, run down, they like put handcuffs on him, and then they reach into his pocket and they pull out what? A little bag of drugs. And they go, oh, we got it, right? It's a little bag with powder, right? Now compare that little bag of powder to how much not maybe you, but how much an average person drinks a night. Is it a little bag of alcohol? No. It's grams and grams and grams of alcohol, right? Why is that? Alcohol is very small. compared to drugs, other drugs like opioids or methamphetamine. You need a lot of it because it's so small. So it goes all over your body because it's so small. It can get in between crevices, it can open up holes, it gets everywhere. It's a dirty drug. It affects your entire system. Other drugs of abuse like methamphetamine, opioids, they're very targeted. They go to one receptor. It's like a glove and a mitt. They hit a receptor. That's not alcohol. It washes over your brain. It's a dirty drug. It's a violent drug. So when you're talking about sleep, when you're talking about anxiety, when you're talking about stress, it affects all of those systems negatively. So if you're a corporation and you want long-term health, you want to get this dirty drug to a moderate level, a controlled level. I'll stop there. I can keep going, but Sabrina, I know corporate wellness, this is your wheelhouse, so
I mean, there's so much, right? Because Jen, you shared about what can the individual do, what can the corporation do, team, what can the team do, and Wayne, as you're sharing about the concept of a dirty drug compared to the regular drugs. I take drugs all the time because of I mean, don't quote that alone, because of my own mental health condition, and so I understand how usually, these pharmaceutical drugs or whatever other drugs tend to just, do that one thing in that part of your body. But then alcohol, as you said, everything, right? It washes you, your entire body is affected. But I mean, I guess, on an individual front as well as organizational front, I can share a couple of, I would say, psychosocial things that can be done. I think Wayne, you've shared very clearly what alcohol does biologically, and therefore best not to take alcohol if you can avoid it, right? Um, so on an individual level, amongst friends who have worked towards quitting or reducing their intake of alcohol. So I was just chatting with a friend earlier this morning, and for them, or for folks who are trying to reduce their intake or cut it off completely, one of the things could be really just asking yourself, what is that drink really doing for you right now? Are you lonely? Are you stressed? Are you bored? Ask yourself what that drink means to you and what it's doing for you. And the question then would be, can you replace that ritual, right? I think quite a few of my friends are like, I'll go home and just drink 2 bottles of wine on my own because I'm bored. I have no one to talk to. And then she got a dog. So, I mean, yeah, someone. um, so replacing that ritual. So what she did, for example, was that instead of having 2 bottles of wine, she got a dog who she had to take care of. She had to like shower the dog, take it for a walk. So the ritual was replaced. And the other thing could also be around delaying your drink. So if you're like, the urge comes up where you're like, I want to have a drink right now. What can help a lot is like, just give yourself 10 minutes, see whether it passes. So I practices this tactic with myself when I'm depressed, I'm like, I want to eat chocolate cake, chocolate ice cream, chocolate everything. So I am chocolate dependent, but that's for a different conversation. So I just delay the chocolate, right? So delay the drink could also help. And on a corporate or team setting, one of the things that I'm seeing companies do is to talk about alcohol or substance use a bit more openly. So one of the organizations we work with is Spotify, and in Spotify is a tech company, but also a music company. And in music, in the music industry, alcohol is also very rampant. So substance use has been a topic of conversation, especially in the West these days. So they've been doing campaigns around this, around awareness, around reduction of intake, and then that trickles down to changing the environment. So, for example, if someone is organizing a team building activity, maybe not, don't do that around a nightclub table. Just have less alcohol around. That can actually help a lot. So, for example, Wayne, you shared about the conferences, right? So after presenting the paper, maybe, not everyone has to go to the bar. They could go to the cafe where there's no alcohol served. So yeah, just small things like that can go a long way.
Anything else to add, Wayne, from what you're seeing? Any recommendations? How can we support each other better?
In terms of like specifically like sleep and stress, like I wear a Fitbit to sleep, or there are all sorts of sleep trackers that you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to read a book and tell you that alcohol is bad for your sleep. Get one of these cheap trackers and have a night out, check your tracker, see it in the morning, go to sleep again, do a controlled experiment. You may be one of those people, and they do exist, who can drink and have a good night of sleep. If that's you, my hat's off to you. That's great. But if you're a normal person like me, try a drink, go to sleep, and see what happens. Alcohol is a sedative, is a depressant, like Sabrina said. What it does is basically makes you go unconscious. And being unconscious is not the same thing as going to sleep, right? Sleep, as we know, there's dreaming, there's phases of sleep, there's ups and there's down, there's brain waves. And you need to go through multiple cycles of sleep a night. And alcohol really blunts those cycles. And that's not good. And as you get older, you really do prioritize your sleep a little more. I think in this talk, we're not really talking about like severe alcohol use disorder. So, if you are listening and this is something that you're struggling with, there are FDA approved medications. Actually, yeah, in Singapore, I don't know if FDA matters that much, right? That's a US thing. But there are medications that are really effective for alcohol use disorder. There's naltrexone, there's a camprosate, disulfiram. This is a really interesting one. GLP-1s. I don't know if that's popular here. Like Ozempic, is that popular in Singapore?
Starting to
Is
be.
it starting to be? So there's some early clinical evidence that says GLP-1s are also really effective for alcohol use disorder, especially binge drinking. So apparently there are receptors in the brain. People or when you like to eat, right, the feeling of wanting to eat is very similar, it seems like, as wanting to drink. So if you are somebody that struggles, and I'm not talking about like you drink a little bit and you want to cut down. If you are someone who seriously struggles with alcohol, I would suggest talking to a clinician, trying a medication. These work really well. And therapies do work. I think that's also one thing that we need to get out there. Like treatment really works. I think maybe when I was young, people used to say like quitting smoking was really hard, and people would just like, oh, quitting smoking is so hard. I'm just gonna not try. And now we know it's not that hard. And alcohol and drug use is the same. Like there's this idea that like, oh, people who are addicted to alcohol just become homeless immediately and like they're just lost forever. And that's not true. There are very effective medications, and therapies do work. So please, if you're somebody who is struggling with alcohol use or drug use disorder, seek treatment because it does work really well, um, if it's a quality one.
Yeah. And in Singapore, we do have an Alcoholics Anonymous
Oh, nice.
yeah, branch. So someone I know has been going and apparently it's really supportive. So there are lots of support groups as well. If you wanna just venture into, getting help, you can go seek a counselor or therapist to talk about
Mhm.
it. It does help to have someone else to speak with because, oftentimes we can't look at alcohol use in isolation, right? Normally, as we've talked about, it's usually it comes with other stressors that we're trying to resolve. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that we've got, just a couple of minutes left. I guess, well, I'll open it up to Wayne and Sabrina, see if you've got any kind of final thoughts there that you want to leave with the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Just noticing a couple of questions coming in. Whoa.
Or we can also answer those questions. I'm noticing them too. So,
Yeah, Wayne,
mhm.
is there anything that's, jumping out at you that you might wanna respond
Uh,
to?
yeah, so this is one of like the pet peeves, and this is kind of why I'm here. Like, at least in America, the research on Asian American drug and alcohol use is seriously underdeveloped. And this is kind of two groups' fault. It's the fault of the US government for not really studying Asian Americans, but it's also like Asian Americans don't want to study Asian American drug use. It's this weird stigma. I don't know if we think Asians don't. drink and do drugs, or we're just like afraid to like shine a light on it. We're just like, no, let's just not talk about it. But I cannot really answer your questions effectively because like we don't study this. And like I'm one of the few people who is trying, and there's a group of us trying. It's not, it's hard. So we really need us to like stick together and like really spread the word and try and help each other out because other cultures like the black population, Hispanic, white population, they're really trying to study their own people and help, and like the Asians are not. At least in
Mm.
the US. I'm not going to I know Singapore is probably different China. I'm not going to speak for Singapore, but in the US, if you're an Asian American and you're in research, you're doing cancer, you're doing maybe general medicine, you're not doing Asian drug use. So I can't really answer those questions really well, which is kind of, one of my life goals is to change that little by little. And that's kind of why I'm here to learn from the Singaporean people and culture and do my best. So hopefully in a few years I can answer those questions, but right now I can't really. We don't really know that well.
Yeah, I mean we're trying, right? And I think the challenge with doing this kind of research in Asia is that we've got a huge face saving or saving face culture. So it's really hard for people to admit that they have any struggles or troubles with alcohol or drug use or anything that's really embarrassing, right? Or traditionally embarrassing. Like out here, it's also hard to talk about infertility or mental health. Like depression and anxiety is still something that's really hard to talk about, and that's why we are having these conversations. But I caught a question here by Christina, and maybe Wayne, that might be for you. What was the difference between dependence and addiction? I'm just kind of taking that part of the question. At what point is it addiction?
Yeah, we don't even really use the word addiction anymore, but I would say dependence is a milder form of addiction. So dependence would be, moderate to medium, and then addiction would be considered severe substance use disorder. So like moderate, so dependence would be moderate, and then addiction would be severe.
Got it.
Uh, difference
Yeah.
between the two. So yeah, in the US we have like 11 criteria, and like if the doctor asks you like, do you have a problem with this? Do you have a problem with that? And if you have like a problem with three or four, then you're moderate, and then if you have like five or more, then you're severe, seven plus. So it's kind of like a list, check-based list.
All right, well, I'm seeing that we're kind of at time, 1 minute after 2 o'clock. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Wayne and Sabrina for this conversation. Hopefully there will be more of these. And I guess Sabrina, do you want to have say some closing remarks here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, anyone who's still here with us, we would love to see your face if you want to show your video. But otherwise, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We normally don't do talks at this time. We're so happy that Wayne took the time today to join us. I know it's like what 9 p.m. for you, 10 p.m. for you now, Wayne. So
And
thank you
now, yeah.
so much. So everyone, let's stay connected on LinkedIn, Instagram. We're also on Telegram. We have a mailing list if you want to stay tuned for more talks and also more events that we're organizing both in Singapore in real life and online. And finally, just quick ask, please share your feedback with us. You can use your phone, just share your thoughts on how today's talk went. And if there's any other questions that you have coming away from this conversation today, you can, yeah, just feel free to share that in the feedback form. Otherwise, thank you very much. I've also dropped the feedback form in the chat. Thank you for today, and that's it. Right? Yay. Jen, Wayne, you gonna take a picture together for social media? Haha. Okay, so
All right.
3, 2, 1. And I'm gonna, yeah, whoever's online, let's do that. I'm gonna, if you're online and you want to take a picture, so I know everyone's gotta like run off. Hang on, just gotta remove my spotlight. It's a small one with a few of us on camera. Okay, three, two, one. I'll send it to you, Diana. And Mir, is this? Okay, thanks so much. Wayne, Jen, anything else you wanna share, debrief before we leave?
Diana, it's nice to meet you. I know we've connected on LinkedIn.
I know. It's so nice to hear from other Asians who struggled with this stuff. To your point,
Yeah.
Wayne, so rare. Yeah.
Thank you for your work. And yeah, hopefully we can have more of this.
I know. I know. I'm trying to do this work here in China and I just need to meet more. I just need more
Yes.
connections. So
We're doing it. It's gonna happen. It's inevitable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm so grateful to LinkedIn for this. Truly.
Absolutely.
Same, same.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Diana.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye,
You.
everyone.